It's on. Good morning. Let me start singing. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Thank you all for coming here. Special welcome to our guests from other congregations. We're so glad you're here for this workshop today. I am just as pleased as can be that my colleague Peggy Clark is here, and Christina Rivera is with us as well. So we're going to have quite a day of it. So settle down and then be prepared to be disrupted. It'll be lots of fun. And with that, I'll turn it over to Peggy, and she's going to go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I am Reverend Peggy Clark. I'm the senior minister at Community Church of New York. We're in Midtown. I don't know if you know Community Church. And I'm the one with the idea that we should disrupt whatever it is we're up to, which is sometimes fun and sometimes a little unnerving. But I'm completely thrilled that you're all here today. I will say that I've been asked to do workshops like this, and I keep saying no. I don't have the time. I can't really figure out how to fit that in my schedule. And then Reverend John asked, and I was like, actually, this could be fun. So I am excited to be here, and I'll say I'm excited to try this out because this is in some way a new idea, started maybe about a year ago. We are going, let's see if I can make this work. I would love to have, I'm wondering who's in the room. Can you do me a favor? Can you raise your hand if you're from Mainline Church? That's awesome. How many people are not from Mainline? Just a handful. Okay. And how many of you would, in your own context, call yourselves leaders? Okay. Maybe. I'm leaderish. Okay. So, there we go. That's me. Here we go. So let's talk about what we're going to do today. Essentially, what's happening is that I've taken the workshop. So when we did that workshop at GA, first of all, we thought it was going to be about 25 to 50 people. So we planned a whole thing, which was incredibly interactive, where people were going to take an idea and like work it through together. And then we heard that they put us in this really big room that fit like 1,000 people. And we thought, oh, that's never going to work. Like with 50 people, it's going to feel so strange. So we revamped the whole thing for it to be more of a lecture thing. And then like 900 people showed up. So we're like, as people are coming in, we're like, what is happening here right now? But since then, at least as many have seen that workshop, and I think quite a number more. And the thing for me is always, I actually like our original idea. The first idea we had of it being interactive makes a lot of sense to me. Because there's one thing for like me to stand here and give you a framework for something, but if you can't really hold on to it and sort it out and like untangle it in your own context, it doesn't mean that much. So this is my opportunity to figure out if the first idea actually works, and for you to kind of be the people who are embodying the idea. I can do this, and I have been doing this in my own context. Community Church is very open for a whole lot of reasons and have totally embraced this concept. But I've also been criticized a lot over this year in that Community Church is a little different from other churches. Not a little. Community Church is very, very different from other churches, and I've been in lots of them. In fact, I was a consultant for the district. I know all the churches in a huge area. Community Church is different. So this is sort of a chance to say, what happens if it's a more traditional context? Can you then really tease this out and move it into a culture? So the agenda is very much what the agenda was. If you saw the workshop, can I ask how many people saw that workshop? Okay, half of you. So it'll be that framework, but we're going to spend time sinking into it. Before I begin, let's talk about some ground rules. Okay. So I have 3. The first one is this is a learning ground. This is not me with an absolute fact that you just have to write down and remember and do. This is a space for us as Unitarian Universalists to figure it out together. That's what we're doing. We are learning and teaching as a group, each other. Second is beginner's mind. This is the hardest one for me, but to every time a new idea comes, to let go of all the things we think we know about it, to move back, keep going back. My director of religious education introduced this to me. We do it a lot. When someone says, what about, and then someone else starts talking about, how we always do it or and she goes, bring it back, go back, forget everything we know, start at the beginning. So one of the things I'm asking everyone to do, in addition to being willing to learn and teach, is to let go of all the things that we think we know. And the other one is, and I have to tell you, this has been wildly transformative for me and for my church, is this ministry of yes. When I showed up at Community Church, there had been before me a minister who was there almost 40 years, and the one before that about the same time, and the one before that closer to 60. So we are a church of long ministries and really strong ministers. And there's a culture there of you do whatever the minister tells you to do. I was just telling Christina yesterday, one of the first things that happened when I arrived was hey, we want to do this conference, what do you think? And I went, oh, that looks so cool, what do we have to do to make it happen? And they said, well, the senior minister says, oh, that looks so cool. And then that was the end, then it happened. In that culture, that really hierarchical culture, if the minister said no, it didn't happen. And congregants had sort of moved into this space of assuming everything was no. So I came in and said, let's try a ministry of yes, from me and from you. Whatever the idea, let's try it. And it's been, I put it out there thinking it would be sort of a temporary thing, but it's 5 years now, and everyone is in it. They're even when I say, I don't know, they're it's a ministry of yes. Let's try it. But it's been really working. Let's start with yes. Whatever it is, let's start with yes. And then figure out how to make something happen. So I'm going to ask you to start with yes in this space today. Whatever the idea, follow it through like the answer is yes. Does that all work for you? Yes. Okay. I'm going to like you. Okay, then let's begin with opening words and our chalice lighting. The chalice lighting says to us that this is holy space. It is sacred ground, and it is made so because we are here.
I need your face.
What?
I need your face.
Oh, did it turn off?
It's Face ID.
Okay. So we're going to start with a reading, and then we'll light our chalice.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cristina Rivera. John asked me to introduce myself. I'm co-lead minister of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, and so I am a visitor here. I'm really appreciative of being here, and being here for Disrupt the Church. I was one of the co-founders of the UU Teach-In, and if any of you did the Teach-In back in 2017, you'll remember it was disrupting business as usual on a Sunday. So this is just, I'm so excited that this is happening, and I can't wait. Yes, so the opening words are from Adrienne Marie Brown. Over and over again, it becomes known the peace we seek is seeking us to the joy of a full bud, awaiting our intention, justice in our hands, longing to be practiced, the whole world learning from within. This thrilling moat in the universe, laboratory, labyrinth, internalized demands. You are the one you are waiting for. Externalized love binding us together into a greater self. A complex movement, a generative abundance, an embodied revolution. and embodied evolution. Learn to be here. Critique is a seductress. Her door is always open. So what if you get some? We are going further past reform to wonder. This requires comprehension that cannot be fit in words. Out beyond our children, beyond the end of time, there is a ceaseless cycle, a fractal of sublime, and we come to create it, to soil our hands and faces by loving and loving ourselves and all of our places.
And so we light our chalice. This is the flame of our heritage. May it ignite hope in ourselves, in our community, and in the world. It's good to be with you all today. Okay, so let's talk about what's going on. This is the depressing part. We're in a moment. Maybe you can tell me, what do you see going on? What do you think is happening in our churches? What's happening for Unitarian Universalism? What's happening for religion in America right now? Disconnecting. People or people from each other?
I think both.
Okay, people are disconnected. Yes. What else?
Loss of hope.
A loss of hope. What else are you seeing? Oh, anger. Anger at what?
Anger at where we are nationally and globally.
Okay, so anger where we are nationally and globally. Yep. Frustration.
Aging congregations.
Aging congregations.
Stagnant.
We're stagnant.
Trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Okay. What else is happening? Go ahead.
Although people will say they're spiritual, not interested in organized religion.
Okay.
People are, their energy is scattered. They're busy, they're not prioritizing. Still,
Okay.
I'm relatively new to UU, but I see a lot of people binding together to do things
Okay.
in this congregation.
Excellent. Okay. I think I saw a hand.
There's a little bit of hope in that people are reconnecting after COVID. There is people are coming back and live.
Okay.
Can
Yep.
you repeat what people are saying? You can't do the whole live stream.
Yeah, she's saying that there's hope. People are reconnecting after COVID. Okay. I'm sorry, let's go. He's saying that he's new to UU, but that he's actually finding it really kind of inspiring that people are working together. Okay, so what the current situation, this is the only time I have some numbers. Churches are shrinking, they're aging, and they're becoming increasingly irrelevant. People are disengaging, they are pulling back. People are showing up with half a mind. I was actually thinking of this. We have, in some way, really tried to meet a new need by doing everything online or at least live streaming it. And then the experience is that people are watching church, they're not living church or being church. People are, so we have this sort of, well, we're more accessible, but we're actually less connected. We're not, church becomes something, we have in our church the same number of people in the room as online. So half of my church is watching, they're not living, they're not connecting. That changes the dynamic. We are aging. We have twice as many people over the age of 65 in our churches than we have in American culture right now. Twice as many. They're in our churches. We are shrinking. We have 100,000 fewer UUs right now than we had 50 years ago. Our congregation shrunk 38% in the last 20 years. I just tried to get an update in terms of the numbers, which are actually a little bit harder to get than I would have expected. But it looks like in the last 2 years, we've lost 7,000 people who call themselves Unitarian Universalists. 7,000 people, 7,000 members in 2 years in our churches. I do know at least 2 churches in this last year that closed for lack of membership. 10 years ago, we had 52,000 children in our religious education programs. In 2022, we had 34,000. That's 18,000 children that we lost in 10 years. 18,000 children. How many of you have heard things like, there's something wrong with our religious educator, there's something wrong with our minister, there's something wrong with our staff, we just need to get the right people, or they just need to do their, don't raise your hands. But what's common is that, right? Obviously something is wrong with someone we hired. Someone's not doing their job. The religious educator is just not that whatever and isn't bringing kids in. I remember when there were kids, there were so many kids here, we needed to start new classrooms. We needed to move them outdoors. Something is wrong with somebody that we've hired. They can't get kids in here. I'm here to tell you, no, that is not what's happening. This is across the board. And it's not just Unitarian Universalists. This is across the board in all mainline churches. Classrooms are shrinking. Children are not showing up. Families with young children are not in our room. That's a standard. And we damage ourselves when we start thinking that it's a technical problem about a particular person and don't think about what is the big picture here. It's like we want this quick fix, right? Well, we're just gonna swap out this person and everything's gonna be okay. Or we're just gonna start, I remember when we had 2 services, maybe we go back to 2 services and then there'll be more people here. All those technical fixes, that's not what's going on here. We also have Gen Z, who are currently between the ages of 12 and 28. Now, I have to say, there are a lot of numbers about Gen Z, but recently Northeastern University said that 78% of Gen Zers say that they believe in God and that they are not interested in organized religion. 78%. Now that's the age, that's the group we want to come. But they're completely uninterested. They find organized religion entirely irrelevant. They are very interested in climate, housing, economic disparity, mental health. They're very interested in the kinds of things we say we're very interested in, but when they come into our churches, they don't find that we are as interested in those things as they are, and they don't find that we have anything to offer them in any of the ways that they're seeking. They also, by the way, were not raised in any religion. I find this really fascinating. In my generation, so I'm Gen X, and we're recovering from something. A lot of us are like, well, I was raised X, I'm not that anymore. But there's a sort of religious culture that raised us in some fashion, even though Gen X don't tend to be terribly religious. Gen Z, not raised in anything. They don't have anything to fall back on. They're not going to find the minister to bury them. They don't think that way. So we are aging, we are shrinking, and we are increasingly irrelevant. That is our current situation. We don't want that to be true, but it is true, and there is no technical fix. The other problem for us is that professional ministry is in a spiral. I actually just tried to get this year's numbers, and I couldn't get them, but I have last year's numbers. So normally we have over the course of 2 years, about 55 people who graduate from seminary, go through the MFC, and start their ministries. 55 people in 2 years. And normally, most of them go into parish ministry. In the last 2 years, we had the same 55 people. Of them, 13 went into parish ministry. 13. Can you guess some of the reasons why that might be? They're not being paid a fair or living wage. They simply can't make it work. It absolutely is, and in a world that's starting to think differently about boundaries and balance, that's problematic, especially when you're not getting paid.
Chaplaincy is more interesting and more flexible.
Chaplaincy is more interesting and more flexible. I'm going to debate you on the interesting, but it may be more flexible. So they're not getting paid, it's 24/7, and there's an alternative that may be better. Are there any other reasons? Because there's one reason that comes up over and over again. Go ahead.
The culture of criticism is very hard.
Thank you. The culture of criticism, what new ministers call toxic church culture, where they just don't want to go in there. And there are a lot of churches, not you, but there are a lot of churches that you don't want to step in. I'm going to tell you, only because it was oh so public, Community Church was one of them. When I applied, I was like, what am I getting into, really? And in fact, I will tell you the transition people were like, really? And a lot of people applied. And we were all, it's this weird sort of like, you want to, there's an ego, right? I think I can make that better. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to fix it. There's that. And now there's a new generation of ministers who are like, yeah, I've watched a lot of people try that and it doesn't work. I'm going to go find another job. I have credentials. I'm ordained. There's some hospital. There are plenty of places where I won't be treated badly. And they're being trained to understand that ministers aren't saviors, right? I was a little bit in the generation of ministers are saviors. Ministers could go in. So there was a little of like, go, you can fix it. And now they're like, you know what? Ministers can't really just fix it. There has to be something else going on. So new people aren't going into parish ministry. 13 of the 55, 13, which is why there's a crisis of leadership. So we're aging, we're shrinking, we're becoming irrelevant, and we don't have leaders. That's our situation. So this is our chance, right? So this is the moment. I have to say, I am one of those people who gets really excited about being part of something. This is why I went to community church. I get really excited about being part of something that's kind of disintegrating. I love the idea. It's my creative spirit. I love the idea of building something where something is decaying. I find that to be really energizing. And for me, this moment in Unitarian Universalist history, this is our chance to be adaptive, to be opportunistic, to be tenacious. This is a fertile moment for us. This is our time. And those of us who get excited about possibility are in the right place, because possibility is real. And here's how I know it. There are a lot of people in this room on a Saturday for a whole day workshop on church. I mean, there are people. There were 900 people in that workshop. There are at least 2, maybe 3 times as many who've watched it. There are people who want and are willing to make the change. I see it over and over again. So how do I know that this is fertile ground? Because we're all standing here doing it. This is where we grow. So we need to talk about what was and what is going to be. I'm going to start with this reading before we talk about old models. This is from Octavia Butler. I will stand so tall. She writes, "To survive, let the past teach you. Past customs, struggles, leaders, and thinkers, let these help you. Let them inspire you, warn you, give you strength. But beware, God is change. Past is past. What was cannot come again. To survive, know the past. Let it touch you, then let the past go. We're going to break into groups a few times today. And this one's going to be a quick. So here's how it's going to work. Before lunch, your groups are going to be determined by wherever you're sitting, and after lunch, I'm going to move you around into more kind of leadership circles. But for right now, I'm going to ask you to turn to, say, one other person or two other people, if that's how the configuration works. What is traditional church? What is the what, when, where, and how of the church that has existed for, say, the last 400 years in this country? Can you turn to each other a little and think about that? All right, we're going to come back together. There'll be plenty of time to talk to each other. We're going to come back together. Okay. And our religious educators do this really well, right? They have like all kinds of like, if you hear me, clap once. I'll try and remember that. Okay, I want to hear now from you. What is traditional church? And I'm going to tell you something. Well, when the PowerPoint goes back on, we'll come back to it. We have microphones. What I would really love to do is for everybody to say something. I prefer a word, like we don't want to spend a half an hour doing this, but a word. What is traditional church? What of the things that you just talked about? And we're going to start, since there's a microphone, I don't know which one is on, I think this one is on. So I'm going to ask you to sort of pass it back and forth, give us a word. What is tradition? It should be on already, right? Yeah. So just one word.
Okay, one word, God.
Okay, God.
I believe in God is
Just talk so that they can. Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So we said traditional church is a belief in God.
Okay. Next.
A building.
Building. Here, go across so we can. Yeah.
Forward facing.
Ritualistic. Hierarchy.
Predictability.
1 hour a week.
I don't know how I can top that. I used to be a minister for the United Church of Christ.
One word.
Sorry, one word. Be happy.
Okay. 2 words is okay.
Prescribed. The social center.
Mine's hyphenated, so it doesn't count as 2 words. Male-dominated.
Special community.
Structured.
The church stays within the building.
Fit in rather than belong.
Curricula.
Yeah.
Real estate.
One size fits all.
Can you go across too, so people on the other side?
Establishment. Community singing.
Top-down leadership.
Static.
Comfortable.
Minister-led.
Formal. Sunday morning.
Boring.
Non-self-reflective.
Following a script.
Sunday morning, I have to repeat.
Coffee hour.
Sunday or Sabbath.
Thank you for bringing that over. I don't know if that one is on.
Huh?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Obligation. Rote, R-O-T-E.
Comfortable.
Investment.
Creedal.
Uninspired.
Orthodoxy.
Part of me wants to say community, and the other part wants to say irrelevant. So I'll say both of them.
Organized.
Hymns.
Passive. Club.
The offering.
Social network.
Peggy, we're going to grab the folks over here because we've
Oh,
got.
yeah. Thank you.
Inward looking.
Stuck.
There are two back there, too.
I'm moving. Moving and grooving.
Full of guilt.
Stucker.
Okay, and over, oh, yep. Two more.
Tradition.
Limited.
We have two more back here. Go ahead.
Only at a certain place and time.
Too much money. Narrow-minded.
Sundays.
Repetitive.
Doctrinal and authoritarian.
Memorization.
Fear-based.
Fear of hell.
Like-minded.
Self-contained.
Okay.
Centralized ministry.
Okay. So,
We've got two more back here.
yeah.
Traditional.
Rote.
Okay. Thank you. So, of the things that you just said, are any of those things true for church today?
You mean here in this place?
Well, whatever your experience of church is, yep. Is church today on Sundays?
Yep.
Is it sometimes minister-led?
Yep.
Are there hymns? Is it 1 hour a week? Did you hear other things that people said that are also true right now? In this current context, in your current context, in your church context, did you hear your church named in all of those words? I mean, I heard UU churches named over and over and over again. There's some things we could say that aren't true, right? Not doctrinal. Although actually, I just had someone really tell me that we are doctrinal and are supposed to be. I was genuinely confused and then stepped slowly away. But there are some things you said that belong somewhere else, but I heard actually a lot of things that you said that are true right now, right here. And that while you may have been thinking what used to be true of church, what's the old model, I heard the current model in there. And it looks like some of you are saying, yes, you did too. What has happened, it seems, to Unitarian Universalism is that we love to think of ourselves as being really different, and in all our difference, we created something that looks very much the same. We pride ourselves on being outside the box. So many churches have said, we're scrappy, we're different, we're non-traditional, and yet, if you show up on a Sunday morning and you walk into a sanctuary where a minister is standing in the front preaching a sermon, and everyone is singing hymns, it kind of looks the same. I gathered a couple of friends of mine. I'm an activist, and I have all these kind of circles of people that tend to be younger, and these were younger millennial. And they lived in the neighborhood where my old church was, and they used to come by after church and like get me or tell me about something or ask me if I can participate in some action. They didn't come during church, so I took them out to lunch. And I was like, look, there's no pressure, but I genuinely want to know why you come when we're done. And now I learned that at least one of them was raised UU, really, and won't go to church. And a few of the others, actually a couple of them had tried church, had even tried that church before I had arrived. And their answer to me was things like, I really can't do the sitting and standing and singing of the hymns thing. Like, I can't do that on a Sunday morning, I can't. Or it's deadening. You walk in and people sort of smile and shake your hand and sit down like there's no life anywhere. And they were comparing it to, in fact, one of them said, and now that I say it, I think that it was the UU, who said, church actually happens when you're done and we go and we participate. And at the time, that was a food justice ministry. Like when we go and we're out on the street and we're doing our thing, that's church too. And he said, that's my church now. So we like to think that we're not traditional. But we look traditional, we taste traditional, we act traditional. People who come in out of nowhere, they don't see the difference between us and anyone else. So we need to start thinking about some of the other models, other ways. I have a lot of stories. I don't want to tell you stories you already know. But I am going to tell you one story that I have told before, because for me, it's where hope really comes from. I've now told this story a lot. I have been telling myself this story since I learned it. So my degrees are in religious history in a variety of ways. In this country, people came here through the 17th century, really on fire with religion. It was a reform movement. They were charged with what was happening, and it moved them. Their faith moved them onto boats across the ocean to a land where they knew nothing. They had no idea what was in store for them at all, and then they got lost along the way. But they were on fire with their faith. And they got here and they created their idea of the perfect society. But over time, that fire wore out, right? Their kids were not as excited. They had to create something called the halfway covenant because the kids were sort of just born into it. They weren't reforming anything, they were just living. And over a few generations, that energy, that what was kind of the Puritan congregational church energy, was dying. And by the turn of the next century, like 1703, and you start seeing challenges to theology, things around vaccinations and this idea of what predestination really means, and people questioning and not being sure, so that by the time we get to like 1730, the churches are clearing out. Now, it's interesting to me because I would love to know what the percentages were, but their experience was churches are clearing out. People are not feeling so compelled to show up. They're not engaging. Church is not at the center of society. It's not the fire in anyone's belly anymore. It's just dead. And then something happened. Over the next few years, we see this, and people were showing up. They were showing up. They were coming to hear them, and bigger crowds were coming, and they were going to larger and larger places. They were going out to fields in the middle of nowhere, and they were putting up tents, and people were showing up. They were gathering their families and going out to the tents, and they were staying for months sometimes. Because what was happening there was really alive. It was vibrant. It was different. It felt right. Their faith was exploding. Community was exploding. Historians will tell us that if the First Great Awakening hadn't happened, the American Revolution wouldn't have happened, because we didn't think of ourselves as a unified society. We thought of ourselves in these little colonies. And suddenly people are coming from everywhere, and they're meeting people from places they'd never seen, and they understood themselves to be connected. And in that, faith was blooming, and it had nothing to do with church. Nobody was in a church building. No one was showing up on a Sunday morning. They were living church. And it spread across, up and down the East Coast. It died down. We can't really sustain that. And some of that energy did move into churches. And it got really quiet. And then it came up again. And we have the second Great Awakening. And again, people were on fire and they were showing up places. And I think of this, and this model for me has been really inspirational, because it's so outside of the model that everyone thought was church. It had nothing to do with all the things we thought were church, and instead it had to do with people really connecting with their faith and connecting with each other. We tend to think of church, when we think we want more people here, we think we want more people here. We think in these very small, very specific ways. And when we think, as Unitarian Universalists, that we are somehow outside of the model, when we talk about traditional models, we're still naming ourselves over and over again. We're really not talking about something that's any different from the faith of our parents or our grandparents or our great-grandparents. We're talking about something that kind of looks the same. But we have these moments in history when church was first created, when Jesus died and church started to happen before Constantine, so the pre-Constantinian church. It happened in homes. It happened actually in upper rooms. It happened in catacombs beneath the city. It happened out wherever the people were. It didn't happen in anything structured. It happened all the time. People would come together. People would meet on the street. We get that Christian fish sign because it was illegal to be Christian, so people would do this with their feet to see if the person that they're talking to knows the symbol. And they would kind of create these fish in the sand. And then it happened there, right? And then the other person, and then now we're talking. Now we're together. You're now my people. Church was happening all over. Constantine came, and a lot of things changed, but we keep having these moments of revival. Church can happen, and it has happened everywhere. I've told this story before, but in my own context, so that church, well, the one that we were looking at before, that's actually where I am, where my church is doing church at the moment, because we sold our buildings. We had 6 buildings on 35th Street between Park and Madison, and then we sold 5 of them, including our church, and we're kind of in this one brownstone, and then we're renting from that church across the street, which kind of cracks me up, to be honest. I mean, look at this church. It is so beautiful. It's actually on all these historic records. During church, like on Sundays, we have tourists constantly coming in all the time. Because the glass, a lot of that stained glass was Tiffany glass. It's 19th century, it's spectacular. And that's where we are. It is bizarre. So the thing is, we're renting it, and so we couldn't do anything on Christmas Eve. So I was like, after COVID and we were doing everything online, I thought maybe that's what we'll do. And one member is like, no, I can do Christmas Eve. We used to have a production of The Messiah. There was a choir of like 40 or 50 people. It was a huge deal. And I said, we can't. It's not going to happen. We don't have a space for it. And she said, I am not doing Christmas Eve online, so find a new solution. So I didn't really know what to do, but I said, okay, we have a brownstone. We're in the middle of New York City. It's got a stoop. Like, I'm game. Christmas Eve, that first year, we've actually done it twice. But the first year, I didn't know what to expect. Like, I'm going to stand on the top of the stoop. I have no microphone. I have got nothing. And maybe there was one microphone. I asked the choir, like, come, sing. We've got 3 ministers. I asked them to show up. I said, I don't know what's going to happen here, but let's find out. And we stood on 35th Street between Park and Madison on Christmas Eve, and I mostly read scripture. I told the story of Jesus' birth. And the other ministers, they told the same story. We told the story, we said a few words, and mostly we sang. We were singing. And while we're singing, by the way, it was the coldest night of the year. It was something like 0 degrees. So I'm like wrapped. I thought, no one's going to come, so maybe I should just cancel. And I thought, no, I'm going to hear it if I do that. I'm definitely going to show up. So I wrapped myself like a mummy, and everyone else did too, right? All the people who were forced to be there were like, okay, Becky said we're going to have to be there. So everyone is sort of like that. And we're kind of telling these stories. And something happened. First, someone came out of their apartment and brought us hot chocolate. Started handing out hot chocolate. The choir had Xeroxed the songs, and people, it's Manhattan and it's Christmas Eve, and they're racing home. We're right by Grand Central. They're racing home. They stop and they stand there and they start singing with us. So our tiny little group standing on this stoop and on this street in 0 degrees, kind of trying to figure something out, is getting bigger and bigger. And I'm looking at a condo, this big building, 0 degrees. People are opening their windows and sticking their heads out, and they're singing from across the street. And it's getting bigger and louder and actually more annoying because we're moving into the street and the cabs are like, are you kidding me right now? And we have these little sort of candles. And my son, who would have been 13 last Christmas, I should say, we had hand warmers. And he sees that there are hand warmers, and there's a man across the street who clearly is not warm and does not have anywhere to be. And he's sitting on the street wrapped in a couple of blankets. So he brings the box of hand warmers and gives it to him, goes across the street. And then there's this hot chocolate. He takes the hot chocolate and he brings it across the street. And I'm standing there, nobody can see him but me and one of the other ministers. And I'm standing there thinking, my God, how did we do it? We just created church. That's church. It does not have to happen in one of those buildings. It doesn't have to happen on Sunday morning. It doesn't have to happen on Christmas Eve. It doesn't have to happen in any of the structures that we've been talking about. Church happens because we bring our whole selves to it. We do not show up for church. We are church. We live church, we do church, we create church wherever we go. And it is not on a Sunday morning, or maybe it is on a Sunday morning, but it's not on a Sunday morning because there's a preacher and hymns and everyone's in a building. It's on a Sunday morning because we brought it with us. Christina Rivera is on the lead ministry team for a Church of the Larger Fellowship. They don't even have a church. They live church. They are church. That's what we're here to do. We have the stories. We have new ways of doing things. We can become new. And in fact, what I say here is new and old stories, because there are new stories. They don't have to be the tent church or the catacombs. There are new stories. I have seen it, I bet you have seen it, in many places where church just happens. I'm going to tell you one more story. I was in Ireland. I was a campus minister. I was with a group of Catholic students at an international conference. We were in Dublin. So people from all over the world had shown up. mostly sort of 18 to 22, and we were in this massive room on the first night. And people were sort of talking to their own group, like, we're from New York, right? So the people, and English was the spoken language of the conference, but not the first language of a lot of the people in the room. And in particular, there was a group there from Kenya who were not even really talking to each other. They had moved into a corner and were watching, looking a little bit horrified, maybe by the noise or the number of people, I don't really know, but one of the guys I was with said, "It doesn't feel right." His name is Joe. So Joe went out and he got a garbage can. And he sat in the center of the room and started banging on his garbage can. He's a phenomenal hand drummer. And he starts to do that. And I'm thinking, you know, Joe, I love you very much, but I don't know what is happening right now. But one of the guys from Kenya saw it and went and got a garbage can and came back and started playing with him. And the two of them are now playing. And now a few other people started to find garbage cans. They're literally turning garbage onto the floor and getting down and banging on these garbage cans, different garbage cans, plastic, metal, they've got these garbage cans. And the more they're doing it, the more other people are stopping. And it's getting quieter. And then people started doing this. I don't know if you can hear this here. On the walls. And then people started stomping, right? And the whole room was buzzing with this beat, and they kept going. They must have gone an hour with no one talking and everyone just banging. It was gorgeous, and that was church. And it happened because the people who were there brought it there. That's our task. Can we be church? Can we bring church? Can we think about this in ways that are completely different? I am going to give you one more story, and then you're going to break up and think about this. What happens to us is that we think of church in terms of the model, the things like the hymns and the Sunday and the preaching. And we forget to think of church in terms of the mission. When I think of that conference in Ireland, what were we there for? We were there to create community, and that's what happened that night. When I think of Christmas Eve, and we were there to build community, to feel faith-centered, maybe for some people to connect to Christian roots, to connect profoundly with each other and our neighborhood, that happened. These things happen outside of the models. So one more story. I've told this before. You've probably heard this. This is not my story at all. They made drill bits. They made these drill bits. They were making the best drill bits. They were digging the best holes. They became the biggest drill bit company. They were huge. But then other companies figured it out and started making drill bits that were at least as good. They're making better drill bits, and this company is getting smaller and smaller, and it doesn't have the corner on the market anymore. And so they hire a new CEO because, of course, it's got to be the staff. So they bring in the new CEO, and the CEO has a retreat and says, "What do we do as a company?" And they said, "We make drill bits." And he said, "No, we make holes. We use drill bits, but maybe that's not the best way to make a hole." And he sent them out and said, "Figure out how to make holes." This is the difference between the model and the mission. The drill bit is the model. The hymns, the minister, the Sunday, this is the model. What's the mission? What I'd like us to do is to think about how we tear apart or gently tease apart the model from the mission. Now, I'm going to ask you to do something, and you're going to come back to me with what I don't want. So let me tell you what. Because this happens all the time. I want you to figure out in your own church, what is the mission? Do not tell me what your mission statement says. I don't care if it actually does say something inspiring or wonderful, and I don't care if you spent years writing it. I really care about what is the fire in your belly. Why do you really exist? Why should you be relevant? If you have a whole generation out there saying, there's nothing happening for me there, and if we can't survive without the next generation thinking something is happening, you tell me, and maybe figure out for yourselves, what is happening? Why do we exist? Who do we serve? And why? Maybe we shouldn't exist. It has occurred to me more than a few times. Maybe this is the natural course of things. I mean, as someone with degrees in history, maybe this is what happens. You just move on. American religion is over. You move on. Except that I am absolutely convinced that that would be disastrous for American culture. Because I feel pretty clear about our mission. And I don't think our models matter. I think our models are what we've been doing. But there's something else. There's another reason. We do not exist so we can sing hymns on Sunday morning. So why do we exist? I'm going to ask you to spend time, at least, really, I'd like you to spend real time, like a half an hour. And I'd like you to get into groups of no fewer than 4, like 4 or 5, even 6 people, if you can do that. And I want you to ask yourselves, why do we exist? Why should we exist? What is the real mission at the church and for the faith? Can you do that? Okay, if you're all ready, are you ready? I'm going to ask you to find yourselves your seat. This microphone is super cool, and I don't know how to use it. You can hear me. I figured that's what a microphone should do. All right, are you all coming back? So someone just asked me if I would talk about community church and the sale of our buildings, and that is actually really relevant. I'm not going to at the moment, but I will before we break for lunch. So what I'd like to do is ask you to do the talking. We have a microphone here that works. So what I am wondering, I'm not even going to ask you group by group because there may not have been real consensus. So it's really the people who are willing to talk, whether your group agreed with you or... First, did you start to feel some clarity in this conversation? Why do we exist? Did the things you were coming up with matter? Do we exist for a reason? Okay. So then I'm going to ask you to come up and tell us what that is. We have a microphone, so it does mean sort of climbing your way through. Well, I think it's okay if we ask people... You can't get up? People are locked in? Thank you, Christina. Christina's going to bring microphones, so raise your hand. First person, I see one here and one here. I think it's okay. It's not that big a space. Okay, before we start, I'm going to ask you all to just... Actually, can we, before you start, because you're all still chatty, I'm gonna do a little reading. Can everyone please take a deep breath? This comes to us from John Alexander, who I'm going to talk about later. He writes, "Perhaps humans' core function is love. Love leads us to observe in a much deeper way than the other emotions. If love were the central practice of a new generation of organizers and spiritual leaders, it would have massive impact. If the goal was to increase the love rather than winning or dominating a constant opponent, I think we could actually imagine liberation from constant oppression. We would suddenly be seeing everything we do, everyone we meet, not through the tactical eyes of war, but through the eyes of love. We would see that there's no such thing as a blank canvas, an empty land, or a new idea, but everywhere there is a complex, ancient, fertile ground full of potential. We would organize with the perspective that there is wisdom and experience and amazing story in the communities we love. And instead of starting up new ideas, organizations all the time, we would want to listen, support, collaborate, merge, and grow through fusion, not competition. We would understand that the strength of our movement is in the strength of our relationships, which could only be measured by their depth. Scaling up would mean going deeper." Let's start with the first person. What is our mission?
I'm not clear on exactly the question that I'm answering, but what we were talking about, what I believe that is delivered to me here, is a community that I can commit to where I can live my best life. And the commitment involves a ritual, coming together that I can count on to grow myself and be the best person I can be.
Okay, so our mission is to help each of us live our best lives. Is that? Okay, tell me if I'm not summarizing it properly.
We had a lot to talk about, but what we talked about was the sense of community that exists here. One of our group mentioned that it's very different being here in person as opposed to watching a service on Zoom. It's palpable, the feeling in the room of a sense of community and a sense of love. Also, the idea that you can experiment, you can take risks, you don't need to be afraid of failing, you don't have to buy a specific theology. You're free to explore and discover who you are, and in doing so, reaching out to others.
Okay.
So we asked ourselves, and I'm really speaking for myself, when have we brought church to a day in the way that you described? When have we done it here at this church? And there are several times, so we could each recall some. One was the church turning out to plant trees. Hundreds of us, hundreds of trees, everybody of all ages. We shared food together. It was a big community event, and those trees are still there today. Another was turning out at grocery stores with children and adults and everyone, encouraging people who were shopping to buy one extra item and donate it to the local food cupboard. Spectacular success. I mean, and it was joyous, and people engaged. The brochure talked about homelessness, it talked about hunger, it talked about this church, and it was just an amazing set of days when this happened. And then we talked about what was in common, what did we do on those magic days? And there was community, there was some education, there was an impact on the world. Those are common things that worked on those days.
Okay, thank you. Right behind you, someone has, oh, in front of you and then behind you.
So we weren't supposed to talk about our mission statement.
Right.
But I secretly think our mission statement says something really important, because I think that we offer 3 really important things in our mission. An opportunity to be part of a community in which everyone is accepted, known, and loved. An opportunity for spiritual contemplation and growth, and an opportunity to be of service to the larger world. And it just so happens, from my understanding, that those are 3 of the most proven ways to address the mental health crisis that we're facing in this country.
Can I just ask, though, is the mission to address the mental health crisis, or is the mission... Okay.
Incredibly good luck.
So our answer to why do we exist is meet in small groups and give people an opportunity for intimacy and community, doing social justice, find a meaningful purpose and doing it, support a person through their whole life, young through old. Yes, and I stole from the mission. Transform lives. Be inspired, get inspired, and be out in the community.
Who else? Okay.
In talking about different situations, and I think it's all intermingled, why do we exist, compatible with one of the principles of mutual respect for others. And in doing that, we show respect for ourselves as well as for them. We do it through involvement and through a sense of community, that we're not just doing it hopefully to enrich the other person because we're so generous. It goes kind of like with our prayer of gratitude for the offertory each Sunday. We too can be enriched because of our involvement with the other person that maybe is in some way less than themselves.
I think a reason for us to exist is to practice, teach, maybe not in that order, but and model a way of living where we understand and believe that we are all connected, that we are more alike than different, and that what I do impacts, like the stone in the water, ripples out, and that's not just something that we aspire to, but it actually is like oxygen.
Among the things we talked about was to have a place to be challenged, to aspire to be better than we are, and to have a place that provides a hub for outward-facing action.
So when we were thinking about why we exist, I think when I think about that, I think it is to create and hold space for a community in which we can engage in activities that are meaningful to us in a way that break our hearts open a little bit, so that there's lots of ways to participate in community in the world, but that it is that place that touches us here so that we can take that out into the world. And when you were doing that reading about love, that really resonated with the conversation that we had to go from a place of love.
We reflected on a time in this church when we had two services on Sunday, 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock. And that 11 o'clock service very often had standing room only. We had people would come into this church and stand on the back wall waiting to get a seat. So we said, well, what was going on in those days that was different? In those days, meaning 12, 14 years ago, something like that, don't know exactly. But we talked about the culture of wanting to help each other, getting engaged, and doing things to help individuals, the church, and the world at large, whatever the case was. Rich mentioned a couple of projects with planting trees and the grocery store project. We also had a small group ministry program where we painted a porch for the clinic in Phoenixville. We did a Habitat for Humanity project. We actually put up walls, even though we had no idea how to hammer a nail. We learned on the job and things like that. So we felt like, and I'll keep using the term in those days, we wanted to volunteer to help. And we came up with the word engagement. Engagement to help each other. And that was something that existed at that time. And so mission is engagement.
Someone over here.
I'd like to just address one of the many things that our group discussed. It was a very active group. Fun to be a part of that conversation. Just one part was looking at two different ways of approaching. Do you create an environment, a community, a place where you can meet your needs and then start reaching out into the world and making changes? Or do you tap into the passions somebody mentioned, the passions of the world at large, go out and harness those passions, whether it's the environment or LGBTQ plus rights, and then through those joint efforts, create a community? There's two different ways of doing it. I think the more tradition is to create a very safe and comfortable environment, and from there, join forces and move out into the world. I think maybe the approach, in my mind, I don't know if this represents the rest of the group, but in my mind, a newer approach is to find the passions of the young people of today.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
No, do you want to hold?
You hold it, and I'll talk. Develop the passions of the community, of the people into people, individual people, to help them to bring their passions forth, and in that way build community and self-confidence to reach out to the world.
And I'll add to that, that they're developing. You talked about a Bunsen burner of our individuality. We need to develop our leadership. I think what I heard from you is that we have fewer and fewer ministers, and I still see this church as looking to the minister to do. And we want to do, but we need to be all leaders, and we all can be. And we chose to be, most of us chose to be Unitarians. Which immediately says that we were looking to be leaders. We were looking to be different, and maybe we've lost some. For some of us, we need to do more of that.
Last one is right here.
Okay.
Last one. Okay, I hope I can make sense. All right. So I think when I look around and see some of the hard things going on in life, like the environment and how we're governed and that kind of thing, then I think, could you hear what I said before? Yeah. All right, then I don't want to just sit there. I want to act. And then I think about our community, and that's how we bind together too, by acting together. And I thought of a time a few years ago when we got together, we wore our yellow shirts, we went down and we stood up for reproductive rights. And we met people of other religions there, and some young people would say, well, who are you people in those yellow shirts, you know? And we tell them. But I mean, I feel when we meet some of the hardness of life, rather than just sit there and we get ourselves up and we take our turns. Some of us are older than others, some of us, you know, and we take our turns where our energy is and we act. And I think that binds us, and then we reach out and that binds us with others. And there's the connection too with life and each other and others. So, and also we need the haven to come and get inspired and get hopeful when we lag, and the community, and also the healing. And then, you know, because we're humans, and we need rest and relaxation and encouragement and connection and love.
Thank you. So this is where the learning ground idea comes in, maybe even the beginner's mind idea. Don't raise your hands. Did anyone hear anything that they found really inspiring? Did anyone hear anything that you thought, oh yeah, my 18-year-old is signing up for that? So the question I really genuinely keep asking myself is, what are we doing? What are we doing here? I actually said to my staff, so we've got a lot of people, right? We've got like between 14 and 18 full-time people on staff. Our budget is something like $2.5 million a year. And we're sitting in this office, and I don't know, they're like, it's a staff meeting, and they're telling me about, I don't know, small group ministries, and I don't even remember, but I went, what? Oh, I'm going to tell you the truth. I cursed. I'm not going to do it here. But I went, what the hell are we doing here? That wasn't the curse. What the hell are we doing? What are we doing? This congregation is paying us a fortune of money. We are 14 to 18 people. I don't remember how many were in the room. $2.5 million a year spent on what? What are we doing? Like, really, what is happening here? Why do we exist? Who cares about any of the things that we're doing? We are in a moment of national and global desperation. There is no time to waste. 2030, if we haven't shifted climate policy dramatically, the planet moves into a place we do not come back from. 2030. We've been talking about this a long time. We're now talking 6 years. Homelessness, at least in my contacts, is on a rise in a way that we have never. There were 600,000 people sleeping on the street last week. 600,000 people in my city, just there. I'm not talking globally, in New York City. You cannot afford rent. Regular people with regular jobs cannot afford to live. Fascism is on the rise in a way that people are finding fun. We're at war in too many places. We're funding wars. We're funding death in ways that are mind-boggling. And my staff is talking about small group ministry, and I honestly thought I was going to explode. I keep asking, and I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking, man, this is what we're doing. We're like, wasn't it fun when we did that thing all those years ago? And what are we doing? I am sending you back to do more homework. What are we doing here? What should we be doing here? You have whatever budget you have. You're spending a fortune of money. You've got this gorgeous building in this beautiful place. You have all these people. There are at least 200 people here on a Sunday morning. What are you doing? What is it that moves you and needs to move the world? How are we building a world where love is at the center of everything? What does that look like? What does it look like for marginalized people who find themselves awkward in a culture that hasn't accepted them? What does it look like when they are absolutely at home? How is that transformative? How are we building that world so big it moves well beyond these walls? How are we justifying our time and our money in this current context? I'm going to ask you to turn to each other, or turn back into your groups, and just see if maybe you can imagine a mission that meets the need of the world. Can I ask you to do that? Try. Are you getting ready? Are you almost ready? All right. Then finish up your conversations while I figure out this microphone. Does that feel at all more clarifying? A little bit? Reverend John just told me that he's been preaching about this for a year. So that's really interesting. What did you come up with? There's a microphone over here. We can pass one over. Christina is somehow again employed to...
I think that one idea that the way we might do it is every month we pick an organization, but we give it our money. I think maybe we need to ask these organizations, what as we as a church, hands-on, could we be doing? And for that month, give to them what we could hands-on.
So why wouldn't everyone just join that organization?
Pardon me?
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking, like, so you decide to give to some local LGBTQ youth center. Why don't we just go volunteer at the youth center? Why do we need this church to exist? Or why not just divide up the money from the budget and give it to them? Like, why does the church exist?
I'm not following.
Let's see if someone else is understanding, because maybe it's me.
There's one over here.
Okay.
We want the church to exist so we have a feeling, a base of community, and from there we go out. And each one of us at this table had our passion, and each one of us want to step and will step and take actions on our own passion and link up with other people in the church who have similar passions, and then let's do it. You're next.
There's someone at the mic over here.
Yeah, so we were talking about what gifts do we have here in the church, whether it's people, and we have this incredible space, and the idea we were tossing around is how do we impact younger people? How do we get known out in the community as, I don't know, maybe being a provoker or a gatherer, but maybe a speaker series. We were talking about new voices that are addressing the issues that we're all concerned about, that younger people are concerned about, like the environment, like other social justice issues. And hosting that here, inviting local colleges, inviting high schools, maybe our youth group leader, could talk to the youth about what's important to them, and then we support them in having this kind of thing, and we all get together and host that here, and that publicizes us out in the greater community about what we're about, and then it could evolve. Who knows what kinds of opportunities to do hands-on would come from that, but we've got to stop being so internal about these things and partner with outside organizations so we're not reinventing the wheel, and we have some impact, but to have a bigger impact and to grow the skill sets and the empowering the young people.
There's someone else over here. This may be the last, and then go ahead.
This may not. Let me just say it. We talked a lot about the act of doing things and making me feel good about how I have developed. And I thought of a quote, and I'm just going to read it. It's from New York. Yeah. It's from Lilia Watson, although it was, anyway, the citation may not be exactly right. If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let's work together. And what I think we all came to is it's not just about helping ourselves. It's about understanding that if we don't all do this together, then...
I always love that quote. We're going to be talking after lunch about the citizen model, and that's a really great way in. So when I'm going to admit, it feels a little like we got stuck on models and not on mission. And I'm still hearing it. So let me throw some things out.
Oh, can I?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Just to glom on, what if we were okay, I am repeatedly blown away by this community. I want to leverage that. I feel so grateful to be a part of this community, but what if we committed to being the training ground, the hub, the resources for building a new generation of social action leaders for this region? We're an aging congregation. Maybe we are not going to be at every march. Maybe we aren't going to be planting 500 more trees. We are so rich with the people here who have been here for so long. And I am clearly moved by the idea that this group could be a nest and a mentoring group and a resource for young people around the region to come together, who have possibly already shown their leadership, to come together for a speaker series that could become empowerment summits, so that we could launch this new generation of leaders in social action.
Okay. They like your idea.
Peggy?
Yeah.
I will say this group, I think, came close to your why. So is it okay if I share it? Okay. They came, I kept asking why to the models, and they came close to living a life with a sense of purpose. Of that all of these models came back to the idea of being able to live a life with a sense of purpose of our values. And so I did share that at the CLF, part of our mission is that we ask the same question, what the fuck are we doing?
See, that's the way I really asked it.
Oh, yeah. We're at the CLF. We do curse because that is the way we are. And our answer to that is because we want to get free.
Okay, thank you. We want to get free.
We want to get free, and we want everyone to get free. And the only way we know to get free is for everybody to be free.
Amen. Can we pass a microphone down here?
So I kept trying to get us to focus on the question, on the mission. Not saying we got the mission, but we talked a lot about how community and the need to belong and to be connected as humans is so critical, foundation for addressing fear, for addressing mental illness, for getting help, because when you're connected, things happen. So being that belonging and community are such a core mission, and we are fragmented communities, we're all disparate, a lot of loneliness, that maybe the mission could be the group, the mission to spawn and help support the creation of communities in other areas that would begin to be a catalyst, bring our skill sets and our talents to foster different communities, to bring in, and it doesn't have to be our community, but could be in other areas where there's need, because there's areas where there really isn't community, and they're going into areas to create the community which are not in a very positive way. That was just...
So we're getting closer. I can almost feel it. There is an epidemic of loneliness. We talk about it often at community church. So something that I'm hearing a little bit from some of these, I'm going to call model ideas, comes to like inch deep and mile wide. I wonder what it would look like if mission was more about being inch wide and mile deep. What would it look like if the mission is to become entangled with each other so tightly that no one could fall through? What would it look like if mission, and I'm incorporating the things I'm hearing you say that I would actually call models, what would it look like if love was saturating these relationships so that you didn't have to create something enticing for people to come in, but that you became a magnet so warm with love that it was felt all the way through, and people moved in the way they always move into warm spaces. What if the mission was liberation from the systems that separate us? Forgetting all the models and ideas, what if in your churches, this one or wherever you are, people became so enamored with each other that being here was the place everyone wanted to go all the time, and you couldn't possibly not be church everywhere because you are yourself filled with love and connection and are yourself becoming part of liberation. All of the things that you're talking about, these are ideas for a goal. But what I'm talking about is, what the fuck are we doing here? One of the things that happened for me in community church is that I didn't want to go to work. Now, I got to tell you, I have the best freaking job of any minister out there. I do not have the negativity. People are kind and generous, which is, by the way, was a huge amount of work, but it's who we are right now. People are so good to each other. But I was bored. And I was coming to work feeling like I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm like managing some big system. Until I realized if I feel that way, first of all, other people are feeling that way. And people are connected to the models, but are they connected to each other? And I started talking about deep connection. I just told Reverend John, when I showed up, there was a caring committee. Caring committee was about 15 people. They were great. COVID happened. kind of broke up. We had to recreate it. We sort of started to recreate it. But then the person who had organized it said, I don't want a caring committee anymore. I want a culture of caring. I don't want to say these are the 15 people who you call when you need a ride to whatever. I want to know that everyone is so connected to everyone else that whenever anyone needs something, they fall back and there's a net that catches them all the time from all of us. That's a mission. Being a net. It is 12 o'clock, and I think we were going to break for lunch. So here's what I would really like. I would love for you to, in this next hour, for yourselves, what I did for myself, talked myself out loud to, what do I really want? Like, if I'm the senior minister of this great big whatever, what do I really want? What do I want it to look like? What do I really dream about? And then I went back and said, this is really what I dream about. And other people were like, oh, I dream about the same thing. What do you really dream about? See if over lunch you can get a little clear. What is that fantasy? And see if you can even talk to each other. What would be the fantasy? Like, maybe you'll get there through small groups or lecture series or whatever, but really, like, what calls you? What profound needs and fears move you now? So let's try that. We're going to have lunch for an hour. We'll come back. We're going to do a whole lot of stuff around the subject, consumer, citizen model. I will tell the story of community church, I promise. And we'll gather again, say 1 o'clock. As I understand it, lunch is in that, I think it's called the fireside room.